What's up, Williamsness family? We are back for another edition of Willingness to Share.
What it do, what it do? How y'all doing out there?
I am Spencer, and this is my most beautiful two co-hosts, my wife.
Yes, this is Tomika. And of course, we have little Cece here.
We got Cece in the building. Now, this episode is our very first interview. This interview initially started off about single fathers, and then it led into addiction and all other sort of things. So this episode is going to be very telling. We got my brother Morning in the house, and I'm just ready to get into it.
Let's do it.
All right, here we go with this episode, Single Father. And our first guest is a brother of mine who I've known since our freshman year in high school, and I'm in my mid-40s now, so we've known each other over 25 years. This is like family to me. My mother used to do a sister hair. I would like to welcome to the show what I call him Brother Morning. What's up, Brother Morning?
I'm great, Brother Williams. How we doing?
We doing good, man. We doing good. Me and the wife here with, our always special co-host, Miss Cece. She seems to be asleep, but everything is good. How about you?
I'm doing great, man. I am doing great. 12 days in, I got a little bit to complain about, very little to complain about in 2022.
That's what's up. Well, today's topic is about single parents, and I know that you are a single father. So my first question to you is, how old were you when you had your first child? 21. What was the circumstances
21.
of that?
Okay, so the way it works is that first a woman meets a guy. But no, I met my oldest son's mother when I was in college, actually. So we went to college together, Howard University, and it's funny because I found out that I was going to be a father after I was placed on academic suspension.
Wow.
With school. And for a moment, I was like, maybe I don't got to finish school. I was working with a temp company, making okay money. And I'll never forget, we were walking actually to the on-campus medical center because she was going to go get her birth control pill. And she goes in happy and she comes out upset. And what happened?
Wow.
I remember I was hurt at the time, like I couldn't walk fast. And she's storming ahead of me, and I'm like, wait, what's wrong? And literally in my mind, I see the distance of us being a football field, and she's still pregnant. And I said, wow. I said, okay. So and in that moment, I know it can be a scary thing, but the only expression I had was just a smile. I was like, wow, like I'm about to have a child right now. And then it went to a fear because I didn't want my firstborn to be a daughter. But outside of that's pretty much the story as to how he came to be, minus a couple of the explicit details.
Now, did your parents how did they take the news?
Mixed. Overall, on both sides, very happy about it. Like, hey, we get a grandchild. My mother was probably more excited about it. My dad, which in hindsight, in those moments where you're like, I never want to admit my parents are right. This ends up being one of those moments for him. Because as excited as he was like, this what happened to the plan? I thought we talked about this, and he said that to both me and to my son's mother. Like, wait a minute, this is what we're supposed to be doing. He said, we're taking precautions and stuff like that. And I think for him, as a father, he saw a lot of what I would want to be challenged with, what I would experience hindsight being 2020. I think, like Spencer said, we've known each other since high school. And the irony of this conversation is that I was in from high school on for the better part. You know, prior to high school, up until middle school, I was with my mom. And then the summer after 8th grade is when I moved down to Florida. Probably close towards the actual school year. I remember moving to Florida during the school year. I just shared that because, you know, it's interesting having this conversation because he was a single parent in that space. You know,
Your father.
My dad was, right.
Yes.
You know, when we moved down to Florida to stay with him, it was just him. You know, even the person he had a relationship at the time, she actually left me just focused primarily on being a father. So, you know, you don't realize a lot of those things, Ben, tell you that I literally hated my dad for all of high school.
That was going to be my next question. How was your relationship with your dad?
So for him, you know, that's why he had extra caution. It wasn't he wasn't excited, but he had he knew what was coming my direction that I had no idea about.
And you're feeling that whole, you know, I can't wait till you have a child thing come back on you?
In regards to my son now?
Yes.
No.
So you and your son has always had a better relationship than you and your father.
Right. So, I'm sorry. I heard that question differently. I didn't know if that question was about do I look at him in this space of like having a family or anything along those lines.
No, you know how every parent, when you and your parent are going through it, they'll say like, I can't wait till you have.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Gotcha. You know what's interesting about that is that short answer is no. So did I have like that little bit of a payback that grandparents wish upon their kids from their grandchildren, right?
Yeah.
No, but I have encountered my own challenges in this space. You know, I'll say this as a father, I've been a single father. I've operated in the space of being a single father since my oldest son was 4 years old. You know, it was 4 years old when, you know, we was together. When he was born, me and his mother was together. Eventually, I ended up moving out, and she just was in, the best way is that, you know, she still experienced life. You know, she experienced some trials and struggles, and overall, it was like, you know what? And even though I didn't think that I was in the best phase, and that's being very transparent, you know, I literally looked at me taking my child as not like he's going to this great space with me, but I said this might be the better of two evils, or the lesser of two evils in being with me. So my relationship with my oldest son is very different, or it's seen a huge difference or a change in comparison to how I was with my younger children. So my oldest son, just to give a little bit more context here, though I wasn't aware of it, I was in the throes of addiction when I had my son, right?
Yeah.
And I had no understanding of it. So for most people in addiction as a parent, we normally operate really one of two ways. We're either your best friend as a parent, or we're like the absolute worst disciplinarian. It's a night and day effect. And my son and I have 3 children in total. But my oldest son definitely caught the lion's share of that dynamic.
And
right?
for our listeners, do you mind sharing what your addiction was?
Absolutely, no problems at all. My addiction, I dealt with. I'm in recovery right now from opioid addiction and pornography addiction.
Okay. I believe my wife also had a question for you.
Go right ahead.
Coming from like being in the single parent home with your dad, was there anything from that relationship or that time that you took away to help you during like being a single parent?
In the moment, no. I think I can probably say that I've utilized the bulk of whatever I learned from my dad in the last 2 years of my son's life, and not the first 20. And again, kind of piggybacking, I never had I can't say never. For the longest time, I did not have a good or a healthy relationship with my dad. So my thinking coming into parenthood is that I got to be completely different from my dad. I'm not supposed to be my dad. And even just to put that in greater context, you know, I said I'm an addict. I'm a 3rd generation addict. So even though I spent that high school period with my dad, much like my oldest son, I experienced that dynamic of, you know, the best good cop, the worst when I was living with him and before he had dealt with his addictions. So I carried with me less of the good things that I got from him in the 4 years that I spent with him, and I carried more of the negative experiences that I got from him. So when it came time for me to be a father, I didn't look at my dad as a blueprint. As a matter of fact, I very clearly remember how I had a conversation with my dad. He said, "Son, you're doing such a great job as a father, and I'm so proud of you." And my response was, "I'm only doing the opposite of the examples I've seen." So like my thing was like, I'm just going to be the complete opposite of you in this space, right? So
that's funny because in my book, I say that's funny because in my book, I dedicated it to my father, and I said the exact same thing. I thanked him for teaching me what not to do.
Do you see any of those traits like in your son now, as far as like, I guess like the way that you are and like the opposite of your dad? Do you see that in your son, or do you see him being more like your dad, or is he just his own person?
I'll say, you know what? Okay, that's a good question. As he's gotten older, I have found like a greater part of me within him. Right? Me and my oldest son, we have a great relationship. You know, we probably were off a year and a half. You know, he woke up one day and was 18 and thought that he could make his own decisions in life. We bumped heads around that point in time. But, you know, I'll say this. One of the things that I did learn from my dad, because, again, I didn't have a great experience with him as a child. Like, that part, I can't, it's hard to go back into that space of a child and say, okay, what did I get? But I had the great opportunity of having to spend a good portion of 2020 just with him, living with him, and I got a chance to be able to really re-experience my father in that space. So in terms of that caregiver piece you was mentioning, like, you know, where's, you know, how's my son? For me, when I realized that, okay, there's more to my father than what I grew up knowing, I took that same position and applied it to my child. You know, it's easy, I think, as a parent to have the do this, do that mentality, and speak it from a space of love, a space of, you know, experience in the whole nine. But I realized that, one, because I've been in addiction for so long, and two, because it takes a while for the child in that dynamic of having a caregiver that's an addict to actually grow and process out of that space of what they experience. It afforded me the opportunity literally to be able to re-experience my son. You know, it sounds weird, but it's like I almost looked up and I was like, wow, I have a new kid at age 20 right now. Like, at that time he was 20. And I was like, well, I have a new son right now because I have to experience him differently, and I couldn't bring into it some of the expectations that I think a lot of parents carry into their relationships with their children. So, you know, in the long run of things, in the short space of it, I'm like, hey, no, he's just like me and no connection here. We're completely different. In the long run of things, I realized that, one, I'm a lot like my father, and two, my son is a lot like me. Real quickly, I just want to back up a little bit to Spencer's, like, intro into his book about not being anything like our parents. And as a single parent, and I've traveled a lot of roads as a parent. Like, I've been married a parent, I've been in the relationship as a parent, I've been the single parent, and now I'm in the space of being the parent that, you know, my oldest son is grown and my two youngest stay primarily with their mother. So I've experienced this space of parenting on both sides, right? It's a lot of different avenues in how this looks. So I've seen a lot of experiences, and I personally experienced a lot when it comes into this parenting space. One thing that I have learned, though, is that at least from my perspective, now I just share it because I hope it helps somebody, because I think a lot of us do this if we grew up in a household that we either didn't have a strong connection to the parental figures, or we grew to not like the parental figures. Maybe the parental figure isn't there. And a lot of our thinking